Good Shabbos, we're very excited. We have our group in the building and we're online now, and we'll begin with putting on the talit. And as we drape the talit upon our shoulders or around our necks, I point out that there are four corners, and I would say that the four corners are reminiscent of four posts upholding a home, a building, a structure. We are building a structure around us. And the pillars are each of the four corners. As you know, there is numeric significance to every element within Jewish life. And there are coils on the talit, 7, 8, 11, and 13, total of 39. 39 is the numeric equivalent of the phrase Adonai Echad, there is one God, which is the heart of the Shema. There is one God. So this tzitz represents numerically, there is one God. This tzitz, there is one God. This tzitz, there is one God. This tzitz, there is one God. And when you drape it upon yourself, you are surrounding yourself. Or in my mind's eye, I see myself as becoming a building, and the four corner posts are the proclamation of my relationship with the singular God. The blessing is Asher Kitshana b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehit atef. And if you're so inclined, join me with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehit atef b'tzitzit. And if this is the first time you're putting on talit, you could also say the Shechianu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Which is very appropriate because we're back in the shul again after how many months? So it's great to say Shechianu. Woohoo! We are excited. Hinei matovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei matovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei matov, hinei matov. Yadadai, dadadai, dadadai. Hinei matov, hinei matov. Yadadai, dadadai, dadadai. Hinei matovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei matov manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei matov, hinei matov. Yadadai, dadadai, dadadai. Hinei matov, hinei matov. Yadadai, dadadai, dadadai. Hinei matov manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei matov manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Yadadai, dadadai, dadadai. Yadadai, dadadai, dadadai. Yadadai, dadadai. Yadadai, dadadai, dadadai. Yadadai, dadadai, dadadai. Yadadai, dadadai. Yadadai, dadadai, dadadai. Yadadai, dadadai. Behold how beautiful it is that we are back together again. We rise now the early morning Berachot HaShachar, the blessings, on pages 103 and 104. Page 103 and then 104. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasech v'ivina lahavchin ben yom uvein layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani ben chorin. Baruch Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam sha'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam malbish arumim. Top of 104. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam sha'asa li kol tzarki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam ozer Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam oter Yisrael b'tifaro. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam hanoten layaef koach. Today and every day, may you look upon us, and may all who see us look upon us with eyes filled with kindness, love, and compassion. Act toward us with kindly love. Baruch atah Adonai, who acts with kindly love to the people of Israel. Baruch atah Israel. We are seated, and every day we offer this same prayer, the same request, to look upon us, O God, with eyes, with kindness and love and compassion. But it's not only seeking God's looking upon us, it's reminding us to look upon each other with kindness and love and compassion. And if and when you and I walk through our daily experience of life, and we look at each other with kindness and love and compassion, that's contagious in a way different than spreading a virus. We all know that if you walk into a room and you have a smile on your face, then people you bump into are going to be more inclined to smile. How much do we communicate with our gaze? So this is a method of transforming the world as we take our steps through it in the early morning preparation of going out into life, reminding us that we have influence on others with just the way we look at people. And let that be a domino effect of more and more people looking at each other with kindness and respect. The Psalm for Shabbat on page 112. Mizmor shir liyom HaShabbat, tov lehodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, lahagid baboker chastecha, ve'emunatcha balelot, alei asor v'alei navel, alei higayon bechinor. Mizmor shir liyom HaShabbat, tov lodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, Ki simach Adonai b'foalecha, b'maaseh yodecha aranen, magalo maasech Adonai mod, amku machshavotecha, mizmor shir liyom ha-Shabbat, tov odot l'Adonai, olazamer l'shimcha elyon, olazamer l'shimcha elyon. You gladden me with your deeds, Adonai, and I shall sing of your handiwork. The arrogant do not understand, the fool does not comprehend this. The wicked flourish like grass, and every evildoer blossoms, only to be destroyed forever. Surely your enemies, Adonai, surely your enemies will perish. All who commit evil will be scattered. As my enemies gather against me, my gaze remains steady, for my ears listen and hear. Flourish like a date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon, planted in the house of Adonai. Tzadik katamar yifrach, kerez balvanon yizkeh, shetulim bebeit Adonai, bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu, od yenovon beseva, tishenim verananim yolehagid, ki ashar Adonai tzuri flow of latabo. The Baruch Shamar on page 122. The opening words, Baruch Shamar, literally refer to, blessed is the one which spoke, and the world came into being. And that, of course, takes us back to last week's Torah reading, the opening of Breshit, opening of Genesis. You and I, when we speak, are not going to bring mountains into being, or animals, or the forces of nature. But when you and I speak, we can call something else into creation. The tone of a relationship between ourselves and someone else. So we have a choice every time we open our mouths. Will the tone of that relationship that's emerging as a result of my speech be constructive and beautiful, like the world is described in Breshit, in Genesis? Or will the tone of my words, which affects the relationship and the attitude of somebody else, be destructive and hostile? And that choice is before us hundreds of times every single day. And that's why I think the Baruch Shamar is powerful, to remind us to use our speech in accordance with speech of the Creator of the universe. Baruch Shamar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch hu, Baruch oseh v'reshit, Baruch omer v'oseh, Baruch ozer u'mekayim, Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al habriot, Baruch mishalem sachar tov lireov, Baruch chayvod v'kayom lanetzach, Baruch podeh u'matzil, Baruch Shemo. The singular one who gives life to the world, the sovereign who is praised and glorified forever and ever. This is your great name. Baruch atah Adonai, sovereign, celebrated with songs of praise. Yachid cheho lamim melech mishubach umafawar adei ad shmo hagadol Baruch atah Adonai melech muhlal batish bachot. and the Ashrei on page 136. Ashrei yoshvei veitacha od yalucha selo Ashreham shekachalo Ashreham sharonoi Elohov Tehillah leDavid Aramim chalahai hamelech Ba'avarcha shimcha leolam voed B'chol yom avarcheka Ba'ahalala shimcha leolam voed Gadol Adonai umhalal ma'od V'lig dulato ein cheker Dor ledor yishabach ma'asecha Ugvoratecha yagidu Hadar kavod hodecha V'divrei niflotecha asicha Ve'ezus norotecha yomeru Ugadul atecha asapreno Zecherav tuvacha yabiu V'tzid katcha yeranenu Chanun rachum Adonai Erech alpai mugdol chesed Tov Adonai lakol Rachamav al kol ma'asav Yoduch Adonai kol ma'asecha V'chasidecha yevarchucham Kavod malchutcha yomeru, u'gavoratecha yedaberu, lodi'a libnei hadam gavoratav, u'kavod hadar malchuto, malchutecha malchut kol olamim, u'mem shaltecha b'chol dor v'dor, somech Adonai l'chol hanoflim, v'zokef l'chol akvufim, Einei chol achi yisabero, v'ata noten lehem et chlamito, poteach et yadecha, u'maspia l'chol charatzon, tzadik Adonai b'chol derachov, v'chasid b'chol ma'asov, karov Adonai l'chol korov, l'chol asher v'emet, Ritzon Re'av Yaseh, V'yet Shavatam Yishma V'yoshiem, Shomer Adonai et kol oavav, V'yet kol Hashaim Yashmid, Tehillah Adonai daber pi, V'yureh kol basar Shem Gachal Olam Voed, V'anachnu nevarech Yah, Me'ata v'yad olam, Hallelujah. That last phrase, va'anachnu, means we. Nevarech, we bless. Va'anachnu nevarech, may we continue to sing and to bless and to pray and to gather together. It's so very different when people are in a room by themselves, as opposed to being in a room surrounded by someone else, where you can see each other, where you can hear each other, where you recognize that there are other people. And each one of us comes into a synagogue with many different motivations as to why being here in this room on this occasion. But your presence reiterates a shared value. Your presence reaffirms something that holds us together. And so to those who have been joining in on the virtual program, the worship for the past year and a half, V'anachnu nevarech. You and I are not intended to be individual islands floating in the world. We're intended to be connected together. On page 141. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la ya la la ya la la, ya la la ya la 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 la, ya la la ya la la la, ya la la la, ya la la ya la la la, ya la la la. hallelujah, 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 El Bekacho, hallelujah, Berki Auzav, hallelujah, Begvaratav, hallelujah, Karov Gulo, yalalai, 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 hallelujah, Betek HaShofar, hallelujah, Benevel Bechinor, hallelujah, Betofu Machol, hallelujah, Beminim Be'ugav, yadadai, 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 hallelujah, Betzilzalei Shema, hallelujah, Betzilzalei Trua, Kolan Shema, Hallelujah, hallelujah, yalalai, lalalai, lalalai, yalalai, lalalai, lalalai, yalalai, lalalai, lalalai, yalalai, lalalai, lalalai, yalalai, 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 Kolan Shema, Hallelujah, hallelujah. Every living soul, every breath brings something that's never been here before into being. And that's your articulation for this moment of how you connect to something much grander than yourself. Nishmat, page 145, a poem reminding us to capitalize on that same theme of the last psalm. Every soul has something else to share. Nishmat kol chai tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu v'ruach kol basar tifaher where our mouths filled with song as the sea, our tongues to sing endlessly like countless waves, our lips to offer limitless praise like the sky, our eyes to shine like the sun and the moon, our arms to spread heavenward like eagle's wings, and our feet swift as deer, we would still be unable to fully express our gratitude to you, Adonai, our God, and God of our ancestors, or to praise your name for even one of the myriad moments of kindness with which you have blessed our ancestors and us. On page 147, Shochinad. Shochinad morom v'kadosh shemo v'chatov ranenu tzadikim baronoi Laisharim Nava Tehillah Befi Yesharim Titalal V'divrei Tzadikim Titbarach Uvelshon Chasidim Titromam Uvekerev Kedoshim Titkarash Uvamakalot Revavot Amcha B'Yisrael L'hodo, l'halel, l'shabech, l'fael, l'ramem, l'hader, l'vrek, l'kales. Al-Kol Shuvditish B'chot David ben Yishai Avdecha Meshichecha top of 148 Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol HaKadosh B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Ki lecha noe Adonai Eloheinu v'Eloi Avoteinu v'Imteinu Shir u'shvacha Halel v'zimra Ozu memshala Netzach gedula ugvara Tila v'tiferet kedusha malchut Brachot v'orot me'atav yad olam Baruch Adonai El melech rabatish Bachot yalodot Adonai niflot Habucher b'shirei zimra Melech elchei olamim. We rise to Birkat HaOr on 100 and Gadiel, do we have a present? We rise. Baruch was on page 149. Page 149. Baruch et Adonai Amavorach. Baruch Adonai Amavorach Leolam Vaed. Top of 150. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Yotzer uvorei choshech oseh shalom uvorei et hakol. Baruch Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, forming light and creating darkness, bringing harmony while creating all. And we are seated. Page 151. Iladon al kol ha'masim baruch b'fikol neshama gadlo v'tuva malei olam datu tvona sov v'moto hamit gai al chayot hakodesh v'nera b'chavar al merkava zechot mishor lifnei chiso chesed v'rachamim lifnei chabodo tovim ma'orot shabara Eloheinu yitzara midat b'vino v'askel koach u'gvura hanatan b'hem liot moshlim b'kerev tevel leim ziv umfikim noga noeziv umachol ha'olam smechim b'tzeitam v'sasim b'voam osim b'yem ha'ritzon konam per v'chavod notnim lishmo tzal avarina l'zechem malchuto kara l'shemesh v'yizrach or ra'avit kein surat havana Shevach nodim lo kol tzava maram tiveret gedula srafim v'ofanim v'chayot hakodesh yadai dadai 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 yadai dadai 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 yadai dadai 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 yadai dadai dadai yadai dadai dadai yadai dadai yadai dadai yadai dadai Singing over the joy of being. That's what we're doing. We're singing over the joy of being. And on page 154, the opening bracha, the opening paragraph of the bracha leading up to the Shema, it's the first paragraph on the English side of page 154. You've loved us deeply, Adonai, our God, and showered us with boundless compassion. Avinu Malkeinu, for the sake of our ancestors who trusted in you and to whom you taught the laws of life, so may you be gracious to us and instruct us. Kind Creator, have compassion for us. Open our hearts so that we may understand and with love discern, hear, and study, observe, perform, and fulfill all the teachings of your Torah with love, which means that love must guide our actions. Love must guide our focus. Love must guide our deliberations. Enlighten our eyes with your Torah. Attach our hearts to your mitzvot. Unify our hearts to love and revere your name so that we never lose hope as we trust in your great, holy, awe-inspiring name. We will delight and rejoice in your deliverance. We gather the tzitziot together, remembering that numerically every tzitz represents the idea of one God. You are now surrounding your being, your body, with those principles. One God, one God, one God, one God. Your whole body is engulfed. V'havienu. V'havienu l'shalom me'arba kanfot haaretz v'tolichenu komemiyut le'artzenu ki elpo yeshuatam uvanu v'acharta mikolam v'lashon v'keravtanu l'shimcha Hagadol Selah Bemet Lohodot Lecha Ol Yachercha B'Yahavam Baruch Atah Adonai Habocher B'Amo Yisrael B'Yahavam. Page 155. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ve'yavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha v'hayom hadavarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha yom al levavecha V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lektecha v'aderech u'v'shachbecha v'kumecha u'kishartam la'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'ninecha uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha. The middle of page 156. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor daber el bnei Yisrael v'arta lehem v'asu lahem tzitzit al kanfei vigdehem ledortam v'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf petil techelet v'yalachem letzitzit Uritzem oto, uschartem et kol mitzvot Adonai, vasitem otam, v'lo taturu, acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem, asher atem zonim achareihem, l'man tizkaru, vasitem et kol mitzvotai, v'item kedoshim le'elohechem, ani Elohechem, asher hotzeiti etchem meretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem le'Elohim, ani Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem emet. There's a phrase which calls out, it's the third line up from the bottom of that stanza. V'item v'isem kedoshim le'elohechem, as you're holding the tzitzit, all of y'all will be holy unto God, your God. What is it about holding tzitzit that makes us holy? Perhaps it's the mental focus that, again, each tzitzit represents the idea of the Shema. And it's also the idea of every time you look at this, you remember that 99.98% of the world's population does not do this. 99.98% of the world's population does not wear a garment like this, which is coded to remind us of the privilege and the obligation, the responsibility and the moral charge to be Jewish, to live our lives in accordance with transcendent charges and expectations and obligations. And so when we put on the talit, we're instructing ourselves to go forward into the world and to bring nobility and sacred privilege into everyday life. And that's V'yitem Kedoshim L'Lechem. All of you will be holy unto your God. And it's all right here. On page 158, two short stanzas in English prior to the Michamocha, page 158. It's the first little red arrow on the English side prior to the Michamocha. Our homage is to God on high, who is ever praised. Moses, Miriam, and the people Israel joyfully sang this song to you. Who is like you, Adonai, among the mighty? Who is like you, adorned in holiness, revered in praise, working wonders? Mi chamocha poelim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, norati lot osef elem. Shira Chadasha Shibchu Geulim L'Shimcha Asifat Hayam Yachad Kulam Hodu V'Mechu V'Amro Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Ba'ed Tzur Yisrael Koma B'Yezrat Yisrael Avadech Enumecha Yehuda b'Yisrael, go aleinu, Adonai tzvot shmo, Kedosh Yisrael. In a moment, beginning on page 159, and then 160, and Kedusha on 161, a reminder that our feet perform spiritual tasks. Remember that whole little commercial with the yellow pages? Let your fingers do the walking, let your feet do the walking. So first, as the intro, we take the three small steps and we say Adonai, Sifatai, Tiftach, Ufi, Yagid, Tilatech, which means as my body is moving, may my mouth operate properly, speaking the right words of God. And then once we're inside the meeting, we get to the Kedusha, we do Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. And in that moment, our feet are no longer introducing our body to walking backward and forward. Our feet are mimicking the ascent of angels as described in the vision of the prophet Isaiah in the Tanakh. So within a matter of just 3 pages, 159, 160, 161, our feet serve two very different purposes. One reminding us of how to move our bodies, and the other symbolically transforming us into angels. 159, 160, 161, and thereafter a few moments of silence. Adonai sifatai tiftach, ufi yagi tilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Anora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chasdei avot v'imahot, umevi goel livnei v'neihem, leman shemo b'yava. Melech ozer fokenu Moshiach umagen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ufoked Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechaye metim atah Rav laHoshia. Mashiv haruach umorid hagashem, Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechaye metim berachamim rabim, Somech noflim verofech olim, O matir asurim, O mekayem emunato, Lishenei afar, Michamocha bal gevurot, Omeda melach, Melech meimit, Umechaye, Umatmeach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah lachayot metim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayei hametim. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, Kishem shem akdishim oto b'shmei marom, Kakatuv ayad neviecha, V'kara zel zev yamar.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevot, Melech haaretz kavodo.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevot, Melech haaretz kavodo. Az b'kol rash gadol, adir v'chazak mashmiim kol, mitnasim le'omat serafim, le'omatam baruch yomeru.
Baruch kavod Adonai mimkomo.
Baruch kavod Adonai mimkomo, mimkomcha malkeinu tofiyah, v'timloch aleinu, ki mechakim anachnu loch, matai timloch b'tzion, b'karov b'yameinu l'olam v'ed tishkon, titkaral v'titkarash b'toch Yerushalayim yircha, l'dor v'dor ol netzach netzachim, v'yeneinu tirena malchutecha, kadavar hamur b'shirei uzecha, al yidei David Mashiach tzidkecha.
Yivloch Adonai le'olam Elohim Tzion, l'dor v'dor, hallelujah.
Yimloch Elohim Tzion, l'dor v'dor, hallelujah. L'dor v'dor, nagid God lecha, olanetz ha'netzachim, kedushatach ha'nakdish, v'shivchacha Eloheinu, mipinu, le'yamush le'olam voed, ki el melech gadol v'kadosh atah, baruch atah Adonai, ha'el ha'kadosh. Kaddish Shalom is on page 167. Yitkara v'yitkara shmei Rabba, Amen, Yehi shmei Rabba mavorach, Olam li'olmei olmaya yitbarach. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitparverseh v'yidadar v'yidaleh v'yidal shmei d'kudesha brichu leila min kol berchata v'shirata tishbachata v'nechamata tamar yomamo v'yamiru amen. Titkabel tzloton boton dochesra kadam avu hondi v'yishmai v'yamiru amen. Yesh v'yamiru amen. Osesh v'mama v'yaseh shalom olein v'yamiru amen. And on page 168, Ein Kamocha. Ein Kamocha bo Elohim Adonai v'yein k'masecha Malchutecha Malchut kol olamim umemshaltecha b'chol dor v'ador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimloch le'olam vo'ed Adonai oz lamo yitzen Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom Av harachamim heitiv avirtzoncha et Zion tivnei chomot Yerushalayim tivnei chomot Yerushalayim Ki v'cha levad b'tachnu melech el ram v'nista adon olamim. We rise as the aron is opened. Vayehi bin Soah Aaron, Vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, Veyafutzu oyevecha, Veyanosu mesanecha, mipanecha, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Udavar Adonai mirushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah Torah, Baruch shenatan Torah Torah, L'amo Yisrael b'kedushato.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Gadol Adonai Tinu Ramama Shmo Yachdav. Lecha Adonai Hagedola Ve'Hagevora V'Tiferet Ve'Hanotzach Ve'Hahod Kicho B'Shamayim U'Va'aretz Kicho B'Shamayim U'Va'aretz Adonai Hamamlacha V'Yamin Aseh L'Chol Rosh Ramemor Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Lahadam Raglav Kadoshu Ramemor Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Lehar Kodsho Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. We are seated. Great day in the morning, having people in the building when the Torah comes out. Golly, that's just terrific. Golly. For the past year and a half, conservative synagogues have been asking a question, and each synagogue has approached it differently. And we rabbis have had many different Zoom meetings on the topic of under which circumstances do we read Torah from the scroll. And there are many who say we don't read the Torah at all unless we have a physical minyan in the building. And I've been in that camp. There are some synagogues that have established Zoom minyanim, and they've determined whether they read Torah if it's a Zoom minyan or if it's a Zoom minyan attached to an actual person minyan of 10. We don't have Zoom for a couple of technical reasons. So what I've been doing, and I'll continue to do until we have a minyan in person, is reading one section of the Torah reading for the day, and then we move forward. And Halabai, at some point when we have a full minyan in person, we'll have aliyahs again. So, by way of explanation, today's Torah reading is the second parsha of Bereshit, of Genesis. The parsha begins on page number 58. If you have a Tanakh at home, it's Genesis chapter 11. Genesis chapter 11. If you have the Chumash, it's Bereshit. It's page number 58. Page number 58. And we remember from our childhood learning about Noach. His name is Noach, and I differentiate Noach from Noah because Noah is a woman's name, and Noah, in my opinion, is an outstanding woman, and we meet her at the very end of the book of Numbers, and then we hear about her again as a recap in Deuteronomy. Noah, Nun Ayin, Noah, female name, is one of 5 sisters. And you may recall that as Moses is getting ready to hand off leadership to Joshua at the very end of between Numbers and Deuteronomy, and the people are establishing claims to land, at the then current time, only males are taking hold of owning land. And 5 adult sisters come forward to Moses and they say, hey, this ain't fair. Well, they don't say this ain't, but anyway, they say, is this fair that we not have an ancestral holding because we are only sisters, 5 sisters. Their names are Machla, Noah, Chagla, Milcah, and Tirzah. And Moses has no idea what to do. So he asks God, what do we do? And God says, what a great idea. They're right. They took on God they challenged what was then to be understood the absolute baseline norms. These 5 women. And in my opinion, the son of a mother and the brother of a sister, and now, of course, lately, recently, 21 years, the father of a daughter, husband of a wife. These women transformed all of Israel reality in life. And that's why I differentiate so enthusiastically between Noah and Noach. Because Noach is a man in charge of a floating zoo who's not an Israelite. And he's described in this way as being a man who is righteous at his own time against the backdrop of a world that is mired in corruption and lawlessness. We have 2 very different characters and very different personalities occupying 2 very different situations in the world at the time. And that's why I continue to point out Noach as opposed to Noah. And so here we are in the Parsha of Noach. And as has been described in the earlier pages leading up to 58, the flood has already taken place. And here we are, it's in chapter 11. And at this point, allow me just to read the opening short paragraph in Hebrew, and we'll discuss a little bit of chapter 11. ויכל הארץ צפחת ודברים אחדים, ויהי בנוסם מקדם וימצאו בקעה בארץ שנער, וישבו שם, ואמרו איש ורעהו, הבה נבונה לבנים ונשרפה לשרפה, ותילם הלבנה לאבן, והחומר היה להם לחומר, ואמרו הבה נבנה לנו עיר מגדל בראשו בשמיים, ונעשה לנו שם פן נפוץ על פני כל הארץ. Everyone in the entire world had the same language. And people turned to each other and they said, top of page 59, let's make bricks, let's build a city. And at the top of this city is going to be a tower reaching all the way to the heavens to make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we shall be scattered all over the world. And God came down to look at the city and the tower that all those people had built. And God said, if as one people with one language for all, this is how they may have begun to act, then nothing that they may propose to do will be out of their reach. Let's go down and confound their speech. They should not understand one another's speech. Then they won't be able to continue communicating, and the tower will be discontinued. And sure enough, they were scattered, unable to communicate with each other, unable to finish the building project. And verse 9, that's why it's called Bavel, Hebrew word Bavel, which means to confuse. And that's how later the English word Babel comes out to mean confused or silly, weird sounds. Babel, it's the transliteration of Bavel. So a question arises, what's the problem with people who are coming together in union with a common shared purpose? And last night I offered the point that because their goal was self-aggrandizement, to make themselves higher and greater than who they deserve to be. But I'm going to add a different point of view today. I'm looking at the word in sentence 4, it's pendafuts. Else we shall be scattered all over the world. If we don't build this tower, if we are not united, if we don't climb higher than ourselves, if not, we're going to be lost. What's hiding underneath that? If we don't do this as a group, we're going to be lost. We won't have any sense of social cohesion. And sub rosa, under the surface, is a sense of fear. A sense of fear at a future that is unknown to them, and they're trying to control this future in an artificial way, thinking only of their egos, as opposed to in this time period where there's still a sense that all people are connected to God, trusting in God, and also not willing to trust in each other. And so today I look at the Tower of Babel as an example of what happens when we let fear control ourselves instead of building and constructing a future based upon common constructive values. And that's why I think they lost who they were. That resonates with me today in these days because there are many challenges before us in our world. And we are vulnerable to that overwhelming sense of fear, of loss, of not knowing how our future is going to play out, as opposed to capitalizing on our strengths and our ability to have faith in something far beyond ourselves, the Creator, and also in the connections that you and I can build within each other and between ourselves. And when you and I harness our faith, again, internally and externally, think about the future that we can build. And it's not a future based upon whose skyscraper is tallest. It's a future based upon quality, taking advantage of strengths and talents and gifts that are unique to each one of us, and think of all the beauty that will result. So Penda Foods, it's that fear that caused this community to lose its way. May we be sheltered and not succumb to fear. And then within the next little section of the Torah reading on page number 61, it's verse number 26, we're introduced to a man named Terach. And when Terach had lived 70 years, he had Abram, yes, that's our guy, Abram, Avram. Terach had Abram and Nahor and Haran. Abraham had two brothers, verse 27. Now this is the line of Terach. Terach begot Abram, Nahor, and Haran, that's his brother, had Lot. And we know Lot because it's Abram's nephew, from Abram's brother, Haran, verse 28. Haran died in the lifetime of his father, Terach, in his native land, Ur of the Chaldeans. Abram and Nahor took to themselves wives, the name of Abram's wife being Sarai, and Nahor's wife Milcah. So Terach is a grandfather, and Terach buried his own son Haran, and Terach is responsible for his grandson Lot, along with Terach being responsible for Abram and Sarai, and Nahor and Milcah and Iscah. And then in verse 30, now Sarai was barren, she had no child, and we remember that because, of course, it's the main part of what happens in the next 2 or 3 Torah readings. But I want us just to get a sense of the family, so eventually when we start hearing more of Abram and Lot, we'll know why Uncle Abe is taking care of nephew Lot, because at one point, Grandpa Terach is taking care of grandson Lot, because Lot's own father died. And then a little while later, obviously, Grandpa Terach died. Who's going to watch over Lot? Except, in this case, he's got two uncles. So Uncle Abe and Aunt Sarai take care of Lot. And that's how this little lineage here at the end of this Torah reading moves us forward to get ready for the transformation of history into Jewish history. And in next week's Torah reading, Jewish history begins. Up until now, we were dealing with global life and global history. But in next week's Parsha, the telescope focuses on what we call the emergence of Jewish history with Abram, Sarai, Lot, and more. We now offer our Misha Berach for those who are ill in our community. And if you know of someone, please mention someone's name in your own home and perhaps also here within our community. Misha Berach Avtenu Av, Misha Avtenu Sorov Garecha Valeah, V'rachei Pravit Kol Elev Kolel Et, Shira Avot Bat Saram, Carol Boys, Yenta Bat Gisha, Chana Sarah Bat Peshalea, Zorik Ben Leah, Mickey Bat Cecilia, Elalea Bat Aviva, LaClaudia Thomas, Monica Knight, George Barton, Mordechai Ben Zelda, George Patinos, Debbie Pfeiffer, Tom Bastoni, Avi Moshe Ben Mendelchana, Hannah Bat Meredith, Henry Macon, Billy Singleton, Cherie Singleton, Amelia Rose Bat Amanda Jean, Avram Yehuda Ben Gisha, Beth De Palma, Robin Mayer, Spencer Bat Bashi, Miriam Bashi, Baruch Ben Imo, Sean Stewart, Shoshana Bat Millie, Yaakov Rabon Ben Chana, Caleb Bat Shoshana, Yudisliba Bas Fega, Timon Bas Dina, David Shlomo Ben Tova Nachum Ben Yamin. V'kulam shenizkarim aleim hashba ramar amen. Almighty God, as you have blessed our mothers and our fathers, mentioning them by name, so too we mention before you by name all of our loved ones within our community and beyond. Bring your grace and power of healing, of renewal upon each and every person within our community and beyond. Bring your touch of life and vitality upon all those who are ill, afflicted, and infirm. Lift them up, elevate them in power and in optimism. Remove the anxiety and the fear and place confidence and hope within their minds and spirits. Establish a sense of love that embraces all those who are ill and all of their family members so that they know they are not alone and they are cherished in your sight. Bring forth healing beginning on this Shabbat and on to the future. And we all say, Amen. A quick touch on the Haftorah. The Haftorah associated with the Parsha of Noach is found here on page number 65 and following. It comes to us from the book of Isaiah. If you have the Tanakh at home, it's Isaiah chapter 54. And Isaiah is talking in his own time period to the people of Israel, and they see themselves, Isaiah about 2,700 years ago, as being threatened and anticipating a potential war from a nation known as Assyria. And look at the imagery that Isaiah utilizes. Especially on page 67, verse number 11. Unhappy, storm-tossed one, uncomforted. And that may be one of the reasons that this little section of Isaiah is associated with the Torah reading of Noah, because of the idea of the storm and the rain, and you're being tossed about with the fear and the anxiety of an imminent war. And now look at verse number 9 on page 66. This is a poem spoken by Isaiah 2,700 years ago. For this to me is like the waters of Noah. As I swore that the waters of Noah nevermore will flood the earth, so I swear that I will not be angry with you or rebuke you. This is God's speech for saying, while you are affected by this threat of war, I will be with you and you will be safe and secure. So I think it's the imagery of these two elements of the unhappy storm-tossed and a reminder of the covenant of Noah that brings this little bit of Haftorah, of poetry, into our cycle of reading. And now at this point, I ask that you rise. Gadio, will you come for a Hagba? Yafa, will you come forward for Glila, please? Keep it close, man. Keep it close. Bezat Torah asher sa Moshe livnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai biyad Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Remaining standing for just a moment, please. On page 177, the bottommost stanza in English, our prayer for our nation. May it be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth. And may you cause all peoples to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me. And let us say, Amen. Amen. And on page 178, the prayer for Israel. Avinu Shabashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo, Barech Medinat Yisrael, Reishit Tzmichat Geulatenu. Avinu Shabashamayim, stronghold and redeemer of the people Israel, bless the state of Israel, the beginning of our redemption. Shield it with your love. Spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them. Crown their efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen. On page 184. Eitz Chaim hi lemachazikim ba v'tomcheha meushar deracheha darchei noam v'chol kol netivoteha shalom. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva. Chadesh, Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu kekedem. Bakasha. Remaining standing for a minute. Why not? Here we go. Absolutely. 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 Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can we pull our mask off to eat?
Yes, you may take your mask off to eat it. Remaining standing, full Kaddish. Full Kaddish is on page 203. Yitkara b'yitkara shemei rabba be'amat v'limeru amen yehi shmei rabba mevarach l'olam l'yalmei olmaya yitbarach yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitparasei v'shmei d'kudasha brechu le'elam min kol berachata v'shirata tishbarach v'limeru amen titkabel v'limeru Amen. Yishlimeru. Amen. Oseh Shabamavi, Oseh Shalom. Yishlimeru. Amen. Page 204. En Keloheinu, en Kadonenu, en Kemalkeinu, en Kemoshienu, Micheloheinu, Michadonenu, Michemalkeinu, Michmoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Emalkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Sheketiru, Avotenu, Lefanecha, Et K'doret Hasamim. The Aleinu on page 205. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol latet gedula leotzer breshit shelo asana kugoye haratzot velo samanu kimishpachot adama shelo sam chelkeinu kahem vegor aleinu kechol amonam vanachnu korim umishtachavim umodim Lifnei Melech Malchei Amlochim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shehu Noteh Shamayim V'Yosed Haaretz U'Moshav Yekara B'Shamayim Imam Shchinatu Zo V'Gavei Meromim Hu Eloheinu Einod Emet Malkeinu Evezulato Kakatu B'Torato Yadadayom Vashevota Elavavecha Ki Adonai Hu Elohim B'Shamayim Mimol V'Al Haaretz Mitachat Enod Kakatu b'toratecha, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'nemar v'haya Adonai le'melech ha'kol haaretz, bayom hahu, yihye Adonai echad, Shema echad. In the moment, the Mourner's Kaddish found on page 207. And anyone who's reciting Kaddish is invited to remain standing at this time. In the moment, the Kaddish on page 207. As a synagogue, we remember with great love those who've died at this season of the year. Rebecca Grodsky-Slutsky, Bernard Dittman, Harry Hirsch, Chester Weber, Joe Gerwich, Dave Miller, H.Z. Lubell, Milton Maisel, Nathan Weinstein, Grace Levinson, Bella Binder, David Weinberg, Jack Eisenberg, Beverly Zinn, Mrs. Nathan Bela Sobel, Dorothy Fleischer, Sally Berger, remembering Nancy Howell, Jerry Berger, and Yetta Lee. And again, if you know someone else who's died, perhaps in your own family or loved one, you might mention that name at this time. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabah. Amen. Be'olma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye dechol be'it Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kariv v'meru. Amen. Yehei shmei rabah mivarach la'olam ul'olmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudusha b'richu la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran ba'olma v'meru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. We offer a prayer for those who are in grief. And the prayer is that you sense that you are not alone. You're a part of a community of people connected via the virtual connections we have, your hometown synagogue, and all the children of Israel are all over the world. Oseh Shalom B'Ramav, everybody at the same time, adjusted for time zone differences, is saying the exact same prayer. Nobody is alone in moments of loss and sorrow. You're essential, and you're part of something greater. And on the occasion when you are not in grief, you have the power to extend your support to someone else in grief. We're never alone. We'll conclude in just a minute with the Adon Olam, and then we'll make Kiddush here in the shul. If you've got wine and bread, we'd love to have you join us for a Kiddush in a moment. Adon Olam is on page 211. Reminders, Zoom Havdalah tonight at 7. Zoom Havdalah tonight on 7. People in Montgomery, in Dothan, Auburn, Mobile, and elsewhere, Tallahassee. We have people coming in from Connecticut, California, I think Seattle at one point, all over joining in for Havdalah. 7 o'clock. It's fun and we sing along. And let's see, Tanakh is tomorrow at noon on Zoom, and that's Monday, rather. Monday is noon in Tanakh. Tuesday is Adult Hebrew, and Tuesday is the Spirit discussion. What are your favorite Jewish songs? What do your songs represent? That's Tuesday at 5 o'clock on Zoom, and Thursday is story time for the toddlers on Zoom. Adon Olam is on page 211. Oh, next Friday is Guitar Shabbat. So, come back in person, masked, vaccinated, socially distant, but Yehuda will be either on the beamer or on Zoom, depending upon how he's feeling. So, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yetzir nivra li'ei nasa v'chepta kol azai melech shemo nikra. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. V'yacharek yichlot hakol lavado yimloch nora v'oaya v'ove v'oyeh b'tifara. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Ve'hu echad v'yein sheni lahamshil lo lahachbira b'lei reshit b'lei tachlit v'lo ha'oz v'ha'misra. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Ve'hu eli v'chai go ali v'tzor chevli b'yet tzara ve'hu nese omanos le menat kose b'yom ekra. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Biyado of Kidroche, Bieti Shan, Biaira, Vim Roche, Gaviati, Adonai Levelo Ira, Yala la 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 la, Yala la 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 la, Yala la 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 la, Yala la la la, Yala la 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 la la. Shabbat Shalom, let's make Kiddush. Woohoo! We've got wine, we've got juice. We'll make Kiddush together. Adon Shamash, are you here or are you over there? Your choice. You can go that way. So wine or juice, and when we sing, Vish, Shamru, and so on, all those different melodies, what we're really doing is we're quoting a small little phrase from the book of Exodus, and Vishamra means all of y'all will come together and observe Shabbat together. And that's what we're doing now, is we're taking our first steps out of this isolation that's been the rule for the past 18 months. We're coming back into our building again, vast, vaccinated, physically distant within the large sanctuary, but we're coming back together as a group, and that's Vishamra. V'shamaro v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam brit olam b'nei uvein b'nei Yisrael lo tili olam ki sheishet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et haaretz u'vayom Ashvi Shabbat Vainafash. Okay, God bless the seventh day, made it holy, and we do as well. Savre Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam Borei Peri Agafen. And in a moment, the Hamotzi, a little Natilat Yadayim action beforehand. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al Natilat Yadayim. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessings upon you. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for rounding out our minyan. And please remember that you are deeply loved and appreciated. You are a blessing. And good Shabbos to all. Lihitraot until we see each other again. Good Shabbos.